Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to bring you guys my end of November reading wrap up, and what has been the norm on my channel is doing a get ready with me while I talk about the books that I've been reading. So yeah, I'm just gonna put on my makeup. Today's look that I'm going for is like some gold and brown eyeshadow that will pair perfectly with red lips. I mean, it's December. It is time to do some red lips for sure. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into the 17 books that I read in the second half of November. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Gifting Me to His Best Friend by Katie Robert. This is, I think, book 2 in her like taboo novella series. And this one, as you can probably tell from the cover and the title and everything, this is an erotic romance novella. Very erotic, very steamy for sure. So we have our main character, Emma. She's been married to this guy, Grayson, for the past 7 years. And I think every Christmas they go on vacation with Grayson's best friend, Derek. And over the past few years, Emma has realized that she is also attracted to Derek. And so basically Grayson and Emma are very creative in the bedroom, I'll say. So basically Grayson agrees to let Emma have some fun with Derek as a Christmas present. And things go on from there. This actually turns into an MMF poly romance. We realize throughout the novel that Derek and Grayson have had feelings for each other for a long time as well. And it's just a really fun, really smutty time for sure. You know, not much plot to it, just vibes. So I gave this 4 stars. And then the next couple of books that I have to talk about, I discussed in detail in a reading blog that I did where I read Jess's, or some of Jess's, favorite romances of all time. So that's Jess from Peace Love Books, one of my favorite booktubers. I've already reviewed one of those books in my past mid-month, my mid-November wrap-up, so I'll link that up in the cards above. That's where I reviewed It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. But then in the second half of November is when I read the other 3 books for this vlog. The first book that I have to talk about is Wolf Song by TJ Klune. This is a book that has been on my radar probably for like 2 years at this point. You know, I'm already a huge fan of TJ Klune because I've read both Under the Whispering Door and The House on the Cerulean Sea. Those are both adult fantasy novels, so I knew this one was going to be quite different because it's a paranormal romance, and it really is. I ended up giving this 4 stars. At the end of the day, you know, I did really enjoy the romance between Ox and Joe. This is a werewolf shifting romance, by the way, and it kind of gives me vibes of Twilight, by the way. But yeah, I really did end up enjoying the romance. I did think the book was a little too long and a little too slow paced at times. So for me, it wasn't a home run, but I did enjoy a lot about this book. And as usual with TJ Klune, I really love his writing. So yeah, I liked it. It just wasn't my favorite TJ Klune book by any means. And then let's see, another book that I read for that vlog was The Secret by Julie Garwood. I was so looking forward to reading this book because not only Jess, but so many people that I follow rave about this historical romance. And so I really was looking forward to this one. This one takes place in medieval Scotland, and we have our main character, Judith. She has this lifelong best friend, Frances Catherine, who now lives with a Scottish clan at their keep because she married into it, basically. And so Judith made this promise to Frances that she would come be with her when and if she gets pregnant and has a child. So then we have Ian, who is the laird of the clan. He tasks himself with going to get Judith from England and bringing her into Scotland to their keep. And so it's, I wouldn't say that it's like a hate to love. They don't absolutely despise each other, but I guess you could say it's like a dislike to love, and the way they challenge and provoke each other was really fun. And I loved the friendship between Judith and Frances. So I gave this 4.5 stars. It was almost a 5-star for me, but the romance just didn't quite get to a 5-star rating for me personally. And then the third and final book that I have to talk about in regards to this reading vlog that I did is Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin. This was the book out of the 4 books that I read for this vlog that I was definitely the most like wary going into, because I had heard from several people that this is a very, very dark historical romance, and do not take that warning lightly. It certainly is a very, very, very dark historical romance. There is so much sexual assault and just assault in general happening to our main heroine, Bennett. Like, my goodness. But this is a really cool plot, and I ended up really enjoying this. I think I gave this 4 stars. So this is about our main character, Bennett. Like I said, she is this badass pirate captain, and she really goes through it in this book. Like I've already stated, I feel like I can't state that enough with this book. And so it's basically, it turns into a poly MMF romance between her, this guy priest, who we find out really early on in the book that she has been married to for the past couple of years and she ran away from him. And then this other guy, Ashley, who is like an officer in the British military, and he basically takes Bennett captive throughout the book. And so yeah, it's their romance. And I know that me saying it's a poly romance might be a spoiler to some people, but you know what? It made me even more excited about the book when I finished it. I feel like I need to shout about that from the rooftop to get more people to read this book. But I thought it was a fantastic pirate historical romance. Like I said, it is very dark, but I also feel like it was a bit too long. I think it's over 450 pages. The pacing could have been better at times, so it wasn't perfect, but I did end up really enjoying it. So next up, we have A Wallflower Christmas by Lisa Kleypas. This is a novella that takes place after the events of the main 4 Wallflower books. And so, oh my God, this was so much fun. I gave this 5 stars. You know, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, going into this novella, I did not have the highest of expectations, because I thought it was just going to be like an extended epilogue of the Wallflower series. Like we were just gonna see, you know, our 4 wallflowers and their husbands having a fun time during Christmas, and that was going to be it. But it's actually a romance between Rafe. So Rafe is Lillian and Daisy's older brother. I think he's older than them, and Lillian and Daisy are 2 of the Wallflowers. Lillian's book is It Happened One Autumn, and Daisy's book is Scandal in Spring, which those are my personal 2 favorite books of the Wallflower series, because I just adore their characters so much. So yeah, Rafe is our hero, and if you don't know the Wallflower series, basically Lillian and Daisy and Rafe, they are all from America. And their father is very well, like a very wealthy businessman. And so Lillian and Daisy end up coming over to England to get husbands essentially, and Rafe stays over in the US, and now he's coming over to England basically to do business with Lillian's husband, who is Marcus, the Earl of Westcliff. Yeah, so Rafe is kind of your typical like American businessman, and he's kind of a troublemaker, he's kind of a ladies' man, kind of a rake. And then we have Hannah, a very unlikely heroine. She is actually a lady's companion to her cousin, who is actually kind of already betrothed to Rafe. I love the ladies' companion trope, because basically what we have going on is that if you were a lady's companion, you weren't of the same class, obviously, as a lady or as a woman of nobility. So we do have kind of a class difference thing going on, even though Rafe is American, but he is expected to marry someone of noble blood, basically. And I just loved the dynamic and the banter between Hannah and Rafe, because from the beginning, they definitely do not like each other. And it's just a fun romance. I will say I personally could have read a full novel about their romance. And because it was a novella, it did come off a little insta-lovey, but I just didn't care because I was having a fun time. Not only with the romance, but also we do of course get to see our 4 main wallflowers and them with their husbands and their families, and that's just wonderful to see as well. And this is just such a great novella to read at this time of year. Yeah, I could go on and on about this novella. It's just fantastic in my opinion. So then right after that, I decided to read another Lisa Kleypas Christmas novella, and so I read Christmas Eve at Friday Harbor, I believe is the title. This one is definitely a contemporary romance, and this one, honestly, this read as if Lisa Kleypas's publisher was like, hey, we want you to write a Hallmark Christmas romance. Okay, thanks, bye. Like, that's totally what this is, and that's definitely not like a bad thing. And so we have Mark. He is now taking care of his niece because his sister passed away. So his niece is 6 years old, and now all of a sudden he's responsible for this little kid, and he doesn't really know what to do. But luckily he also has the help of his brothers, so he's not totally on his own. But yeah, they're just living in this small town. And then we have Maggie, who works at the local bookshop. And something else to note about Mark's niece that he is now taking care of is that since her mother passed away, she has not spoken like a single word. But when Mark and his niece go to the bookshop that Maggie works at, all of a sudden she starts talking to Maggie. And so that's kind of what starts this attraction between the two of them. This was just really sweet. You know, it's like a 4-hour audiobook. It's a really quick read. I could have used more depth to the characters and just more development in the romance, but because it's such a short novella, you just don't get that time on the page. And so I wasn't really all that attached to the characters, and so that's why the romance wasn't like anything amazing for me. But if you're looking for a Lisa Kleypas Christmas novella, then yes, of course, read it. Like, it's perfectly fine. I gave it 3.5 stars. So next up, we have Priest by Sierra Simone. Talk about a taboo romance. Oh my goodness. You know, to be upfront with you guys, I was a bit wary going into this book because I was raised Catholic, and seeing that this was a Catholic priest romance, I was like, yikes, you know. But really, I had no need to be afraid because I absolutely loved this. Oh my god, I gave it 5 stars. This is such a fantastic book. There's also a sequel novella that I read right after this that I'll get to in just a minute. But so many people that I follow adore this kind of series that Sierra Simone has written, because there's Priest, Midnight Mass, like I said, that's the sequel. There's also Sinner and Saint, which are books that take place in this same world. They just feature different characters. So yeah, we have Father Tyler Bell. He is about 29 years old, and he is the priest of his local parish. So this parish went through a lot of tragedy and scandal because about 10 years before, the priest that was there molested Tyler's sister, which then led Tyler's sister to committing suicide. So there's definitely some heavy themes going on. Definitely, you know that before going in. And I'm not spoiling anything because that's introduced like pretty much at the beginning of the book. And so because of this terrible, terrible tragedy, Tyler feels guilty that he didn't, notice the signs of distress from his sister, and that the Catholic faith wronged her so much. And so he ends up becoming a priest, and he, just really wants to improve the faith and how it's run, but also how his local parish is run. He's a very devoted priest. He's very devoted to his congregation, but at the same time, he's very human. And we learn that in college, he was kind of crazy in terms of his, let's just say, sexual appetite. I guess that's how we'll word it. And so then in comes Poppy, our heroine. Now, she is someone that is just now discovering the Catholic faith, and so she goes to confession, where Father Bell is working, to confess things that she's done in her past and to try to see if the Catholic faith is for her. And yeah, it's their romance. And I know it sounds insane, but Sierra Simone, first of all, her writing is everything. It is absolutely, absolutely incredible. I cannot wait to read more from her simply because of her writing. The way that she wrote about the Catholic faith in general was just so beautiful. And the way she wrote about like Tyler's relationship with God specifically, and the way that like he feels God's presence, like how crazy is it that a taboo romance like this actually makes me want to turn back to Catholicism? Because like I said, I was raised Catholic, but I'm not practicing anymore. But the fact that this book made me like seriously think about my own relationship with God, like that is just crazy. And I did really enjoy the development of the romance between Poppy and Tyler. And yes, there are some pretty like blasphemous sex scenes going on. Like, let me just tell you, there are scenes in a church. I'll just end it at that. But yeah, like Sierra Simone definitely brings it with the steam for sure, but this was also beautiful. And then straight away I went into Midnight Mass, which is the sequel novella. So it's about the same couple, and basically this picks up right where the first book left off. And what I really enjoyed about this novella, I ended up giving this 4 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star read like Priest was, but I did really enjoy seeing like the after the happily ever after. What happens after these people get married? Is it all sunshine and rainbows? I can tell you that it's not. And it's just really interesting to see this couple face these new challenges. And yeah, this was just really great as well. Also, I want to point out the audiobook for Priest was so amazing, because Jacob Morgan is the narrator, and the way that he narrates, because it's all from Tyler's point of view, which I think is so freaking cool. I have never read a romance novel that is exclusively from the hero's point of view. But yeah, the way that Jacob Morgan voices Tyler is just perfection. So good. So highly recommend going with the audiobook. I did not listen to the audiobook for Midnight Mass because I did not want to spend an Audible credit for a 4-hour audiobook. But let's move on from there. Next book I read was A Princess for Christmas by Jenny Holiday. You guys, this was exactly what I needed from a Christmas romance. Oh my goodness. So the premise will remind you of like those kind of cheesy Christmas princess movies on Netflix, the ones that star Vanessa Hudgens. And so yeah, we have Marie. She is the princess of a fictional kingdom called Eldovia, I believe. Sounds like Genovia, like from you know, the Princess Diaries. But yeah, so she is in New York. She has some business to do. And then we have Leo, our hero. He's this somewhat grumpy, like, guy from the Bronx. He's got that Bronx accent. He's a very real type of guy. So he's like the opposite of Marie in so many ways. And Leo is a cab driver, and he's also taking care of his much younger sister Gabby because their parents passed away. I feel like that's a common Christmas romance trope that like we have a single father or a brother taking care of a sister because of a parent's death. So he's a cab driver. He's driving Gabby around in New York, but he's off duty. He's just driving the cab around, and he happens to see Marie, who is in this like ridiculous dress. She's trying to get to this like yacht party to do some business essentially. And so she just flags him down, and she looks so desperate that Leo's sister makes him pull over and drive this princess to her yacht party. And so basically what happens is she employs him to be her chauffeur while she's in New York. And okay, what I love about this romance is especially the first part when they're in New York. Like, it's just the perfect like Christmas in New York romance novel vibes. Like, he takes her like ice skating and like to eat like authentic New York cuisine, and it's just like the vibe is there. It was so cute. What's interesting about this book though is that you're gonna go into it thinking that it's going to be a Hallmark movie in every way, like it's going to be closed door, like little to no steam, and you would be wrong about that. And I knew going into this that this was going to be steamy because I know that Jenny Holiday writes pretty steamy books. And I don't know, that just made me so happy. Like, it was, you get like the best of both worlds, because you get the Hallmark movie or the Netflix movie vibes, but you also get steam and sexy times, and it was so good. I almost gave this 5 stars, but the ending wrapped up like a little too neat and quick for me. You know, and the main conflict of like why these two people couldn't be together was solved way too quickly too. So I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. Highly recommend it if you are looking for just a really great Christmas romance that will make you feel warm and fuzzy inside. So to be honest, the next couple of books that I have to talk about really were not all that special. I gave them both like 3 stars, so I'm not going to talk about them too long in this video. But the first one is Christmas with the Sheriff by Victoria James. I was really in the mood for a small town Christmas romance. This is also a very short romance novel. It was only like a 5.5 hour maybe audiobook. I don't want to talk about the plot too much because, like I said, this really was not anything special, but it's just a small town romance about our heroine who leaves the small town that she's from for years, and then she comes back after her husband passes away. And so it's a romance with the local sheriff who was really good friends with her husband that passed away, but we learned that her husband was not all that great of a dude, but this was just fine. Like, it started off pretty solid, but I quickly started getting bored, and I really only finished it because it was just something to listen to while I was getting work done. And then the next book that I read was A Matter of Life and Death by Ellie Alexander. Now, to be real, I didn't really know what to expect from this book because it is a cozy mystery, which is a genre, or I guess a subgenre of mystery books that I've never read before. And so this is book 2 in a pretty lengthy series by Ellie Alexander that she is actually still writing books for, because the most recent book of the series, which is like book 14, just recently came out. But basically, a cozy mystery is a mystery novel. Usually it's a murder mystery, but it also just has like really cozy vibes. Like, there's a small town. This series in particular centers around our main character. I believe her name's Julia, and she co-owns this bakery. And so the vibe of this series is very much centered around the bakery and all of the food that she makes. And this book definitely made me really hungry while reading it. And in this installment, Julia gets roped into being in this reality show on a cooking channel, and one of the contestants gets murdered early on in the book, and so she starts investigating the murder herself, kind of, even though the police is also investigating it. So I read this one, gave it 3 stars, and then I also tried reading another book in this series, which is like A Cup of Holiday Fear, which is like book 10 of the series. You definitely don't have to read this series in order by any means. And what I've really realized about the cozy mystery genre, or maybe just about this series, is that, you know, it's so much about the coziness that this book and this series just feels like very like mundane and just like too normal. Like, I want more excitement in my mysteries. This is definitely not a thriller by any means, but yeah, I just like want more excitement in these kinds of stories, and that's not what this genre is about. This genre is about the cozy vibes, and so I think that this is just not a genre for me, and that's totally fine. All right, my camera battery died, so I had to go change out the battery, so sorry if the angle changed too much, but we are back at it. The next book that I want to talk about is Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark. I have been dying to read a Sophie Lark book for the longest time this year, because I feel like all of a sudden in 2021, so many people that I follow, like so many romance booktubers that I follow, have been reading and loving Sophie Lark. Basically, she writes like darker mafia romances. Her most recent duet, I don't think is very mafia, but I think it's about a serial killer. So yeah, she definitely writes like darker contemporary romances. And this book, Brutal Prince, is the first book in her Brutal Birthright series, which is a mafia romance series. And so we have Callum and Ada. This is a little bit of an age gap, I think, because I think Ada might be like just about 20 and Callum is just about 30. So they are in 2 different families. Callum is in an Irish family. Ada is in an Italian family, and this takes place in Chicago. Basically, these 2 families have like kind of been feuding for a really long time, like when it comes to like business ventures and things like that. And so basically Ada and her brothers crash a party that Callum's family is throwing, and Ada ends up starting a fire in like their library. Like things just get really crazy really fast, and then there's like an altercation between Callum and Ada that same night, and basically their families agree that the only way to prevent all-out warfare between the two families is for Ada and Callum to marry so that they can have some sort of alliance. So it's an arranged marriage story, and it's also enemies to lovers. My goodness, these two people hate each other with a passion of 1,000 suns. And I will say the pranks that they do on each other and like different things like that, that was definitely really entertaining. I ended up giving this 4 stars because I just feel like the switch from hate to love happened a bit too abruptly, in my opinion. And I also feel like this romance just in general could have had more depth to it. But I did overall really enjoy this. There's also some suspense elements as well, which is pretty typical of mafia romances and darker romances. So I would recommend this one. I'm really looking forward to checking out more books in this series and just more from Sophie Lark in general. So then we have The Raquel of Roth by Amelie Howard. I was so excited about this book. You guys might recall that I featured this in my most recent 5-star predictions video, which I will link up in the cards above. So I read the first book in this historical romance series, which was The Beast of Bezek, and I loved that book. I gave it 5 stars. And so this one is the sequel, of course, and we are now centering around our main character Isabel, who is the sister of Astrid, who was the heroine in book 1. And this is a marriage in trouble historical romance. Amazing. One of my favorite tropes in one of my favorite subgenres of romance. And so, yeah, we have Isabel. Basically, she ends up getting married to Winter, who is the Marquis of Roth. It's a marriage of convenience. He kind of saves her from a really bad situation where she would have had to marry this Earl who was just like this terrible man. And that actually happens in The Beast of Bezek, but you get a recap of that basically at the beginning of this book. And so basically they have their wedding night, and then he just leaves her. He just leaves her at his country estate and goes back to London, and she is stuck living with his father, who is a duke. And so we see that over the 3 years, she develops this really great friendly relationship with the duke. And basically Winter's got some daddy issues. This is one of those historicals, you know, like with Bridgerton, right? With Simon. Yeah, he's got some definite daddy issues. He basically just thinks that his father did terrible things to his mother, and his mother is now passed away. I'll tell you right now, Winter is kind of an ass. Like, he's not the best hero, but he's also not cruel or mean or anything like that. Like, he's just got these dumb daddy issues, and I will say at least those issues get solved by the end of the book. But that's what's getting in his way with being with Isabel, because he's attracted to Isabel. He definitely is falling for her, but he doesn't want to. And so, yeah, he leaves her, goes to London. 3 years pass. Isabel is just like over his bullshit, and so she goes after him to London to confront him about leaving her and not being, you know, a very good husband to her. And so things go on from there. I just love Isabel's character because, you know, during this time period, like, I just think that's so cool, the way that she just like goes and gets what she wants, and what she wants is Winter. There's another really fun part of this plot because Isabel and her friend start writing these Lady Darcy articles. So in that way it gives me vibes of like Lady Whistledown in Bridgerton, except instead of like spilling all the London tea and gossip, this is basically an advice and educational column for women for very scandalous things such as sex and love and marriage. You know, these were things that women definitely weren't talking about back then. And so, yeah, they're writing this article, and no, of course nobody knows that it's them, and that's just another really fun part of this plot. So I personally really, really loved this. The pacing was fantastic. Yeah, the romance ended up being really great as well once Winter got his head out of his ass. And yeah, I highly recommend this. I gave it 5 stars. All right, I am finished getting ready. Let's talk about these last couple of books. So the next book I have to talk about is Window Shopping by Tessa Bailey. Oh my goodness. I knew I was going to love this book going into it, and I truly did. I gave it 5 stars. One of my favorite romances of the year. Tessa Bailey, man, lately she's been coming out with some heavy hitters for me personally. And so this one is a Grumpy Sunshine where we have Stella, who is the grumpy character. She's our heroine. And she has been recently released from prison, and she is now in New York City. She just happens to be walking by this window display on 5th Avenue past this department store called Vivant, and she sees this like really weird window display with like penguins working in Santa's workshop. It just totally does not match the vibe of the department store because it's like a luxury department store. And then we have Aiden, our hero. He is definitely the sunshiny character. He wears bow ties. He's seemingly this very straight-laced department store manager, and so he is the manager of Vivant. He sees Stella looking at this window display and looking very puzzled, and so he asks for her honest opinion. She lays into it. She actually has a passion for window dressing, and she kind of studied that in college before she went to prison. And so basically he ends up giving her a job eventually. It's kind of like on a trial basis. One of the things I adored about this book is Stella's personal journey. The way that she learns and grows and moves on from her past, you know, of being in prison and creating this new life for herself. It's inspiring. It's beautiful. I also loved this emotional journey that she went through in terms of this toxic friendship with this other character, Nicole. I mean, her friendship with Nicole is kind of the reason why she went to prison, so there's a lot going on there. Then we have Aiden. Oh my god. He is like the perfect man because he's got this quirky, fun personality. You know, he's seemingly just this very sunshiny guy, of course, but in the bedroom, let's just say he turns very dominant and he talks dirty, and it's absolutely everything. Of course, Tessa Bailey brings it with the steam, and she really brought it with this book for sure. And this will give you all of those warm and fuzzy Christmas feelings that you want. But it just also has a lot of depth to it. And I loved also seeing Stella's passion for window dressing. That's not something you ever read about in a romance novel. I've never read any kind of novel where the main character is interested in that kind of career. But yeah, it was just absolutely amazing. It gave me everything I wanted from this story and more. And by the end, I was crying, and yeah, it was just amazing. Please read this if this at all sounds interesting to you. All right, we have just a couple books left. We can do this, guys. We can get through this. And the next one is The Lights on Knockbridge Lane by Rowan Parrish. This is technically book 3 in a series, but it's also a Harlequin special edition. You can definitely read it as a standalone. I did. This is the sweetest and most wholesome Christmas romance you will ever read. We have Adam and Wes. They live across the street from each other. This also has a Grumpy Sunshine vibe to it. We also have Adam, who is now the father to his sister's kid. Like, a lot of these books I've been talking about have been like single parent Christmas romances. But yeah, so there's a lot going on with that situation. And basically he was married to this guy Mason, but Mason never really wanted to be a father to Gus, or August is her full name. That is Adam's daughter. And so he ended up divorcing Mason, and now he's living by himself on Knockbridge Lane. And all Gus wants for Christmas is to have the house with the most lights. And so he sets out on fulfilling that dream. So then we have Wes, who lives across the street. He's very reclusive. He's a scientist. He's kind of an inventor, and he has all of these like crazy animals in his house. And the fact that Rowan Parrish can make a tarantula seem adorable, like she made me want to pet this tarantula. I don't know how she did that sorcery, but it somehow happened. It's absolutely insane. Yeah, this was just so adorable. I gave it 4 stars. Just, I really do recommend this if you're looking for just a really sweet Christmas romance. Then we have I Like Being Watched by Jessica Gadziala. The premise, I mean, you can tell what it's about, right, by just the cover and the title. But yeah, we have our main character, and she gets this job working for Fitzwilliam Buchanan. He is a billionaire, and she goes for this job because her best friend had this job, basically as like a housekeeper or a house manager. but she realized that this dude has hidden cameras all over his house, and that really freaked her out. So her friend quit the job, and now our main character is going after this job because she's an exhibitionist. She loves to be watched by people. And so she plans to get this job, and she just kind of plans on doing scandalous things on camera because she gets a thrill from it, and things go on from there. This gave me Jessica Kane vibes. I did think this was too long, like honestly like a solid 50 pages too long, and this is a novella, and I just think that for like an erotic romance novella like this, it just didn't need to be 200 pages. It definitely could have been like 150 pages, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. Gave it 3.5 stars. Of course, there were fun steamy times. I would recommend it if the premise sounds interesting to you. And then the last book that I have to talk about is All the Feels by Olivia Dade. I have so many thoughts about this book. Let me just tell you right now, I did the longest Goodreads review I have ever done for this book, and I'm currently filming a reading vlog, and I talked about this book for like a solid 15 to 20 minutes in that vlog, so I'm really not going to talk about it much in this video. Just know that this is the sequel to, spoiler alert, we are following Alex, who is an actor, and Lauren, who is hired to be basically his babysitter because he gets into this bar fight. We have some like grumpy, sunshiny vibes going on. And what I will say about this book, I gave it 4 stars. The vibe of the book changes quite a bit between the first half and the second half, and that's kind of what threw me for a loop. I didn't really love Alex's character, especially in the first half. I don't know, he like weirdly fixates on Lauren's body. Lauren is plus sized, as you can tell from the cover, and he just like makes weird comments about her in his inner monologue, and that really weirded me out. But by the second half, he stops doing that. The vibe really changes between these two characters, and I overall really enjoyed their romance. It wasn't quite what I wanted from these characters because we see them quite a bit in, spoiler alert, like I said, the first book of the series. So I wanted more for their characters. The plot wasn't my absolute favorite. Like, I just feel like Olivia Dade could have done more with these characters. So yeah, gave it 4 stars. So that is going to be it for this end of November reading wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope that you guys have been enjoying this get ready with me format that I've been doing for these videos. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to tell me about some of the books that you've been loving in November. And with all of that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.